Hello there, neighbours. Hope everyone's well. It's me again. Hope everything is gaming goodness for you and all your things. I was thinking today, as I was working, not about work, heavens, no, we don't think about work, about settings. Settings are interesting. And I was thinking the things that I look for in a setting that makes it interesting to me. Gaming settings have to walk a line of having enough information to be interesting, but not having so much information that it's daunting. Also, what makes a good game setting is not always the same thing as a good setting for a book. So there were a few things I was thinking about along these terms. One of the first things that I look for in a setting that stands out to make it interesting to me, anyway, is is there room to explore? Is there room to do some stuff? Some settings get so thoroughly defined that the actual room to do anything interesting isn't really there. It's a bit like Star Wars. If you confine yourself in Star Wars to only the bits that were in the movies, there's not a lot to do because, well, it's all being done by the heroes. Now, if you're looking for, looking beyond that, looking to the rest of that really epic galaxy and all the stuff going on and the Jedi and the various other things, then there's more to do with. But if you were to just confine yourself to the movies, it makes a less interesting setting for a game to play in. Now, and that's kind of how we ended up with the expanded universe. One of the broadening aspects of the expanded universe is that West End Games was maintaining a fairly detailed breakdown on a lot of the world, and quite often the books that they had written would be sent to new writers so they could base their world in the same setting, and it would, sort of snowball from there. But yeah, it's one of those things that having the room to explore, to look around. I was looking at the Titan's Grave thing a while back because I was involved in an episode of the Tome Show where they talked about it, and the actual Titan's Grave book only talks about like 3 cities. They've got this huge world. They've got this map, and they just name some things. And you don't know what's there. You don't know what's going on. And there's a lot of room to explore. So it makes it an interesting setting. Another thing that I like is a sense of the sort of gonzo action. Now, I suppose I should define my terms here. Not so embroiled in being realistic that they can't have just random fun stuff in it. If you have power robot wearing apes in your setting, there's no realism that leads to that point. That is just, you're including it because it sounded fun. And Risk does this very well. Risk does some things not so well, but one of the things it does real well is, here's this great idea, and we're just going to toss it in because it sounded fun. Not because it actually made any sense, but because it sounded fun. Vampire Nation of South America, the Wandering Knights of the West, Cyber Knights, and empires of insect-like creatures coming down from rifts in outer space, and there's a rift that opens up to a world that's alive, and Atlantis came back, and it's just full of, we're just going to toss these ideas in here because it sounded fun, not because it made any sense. And then they try and build a world around those fun ideas, and I think that that sense of we're just going to toss some things in to make it fun and then figure out how to fit them together certainly helps. You can go too far with this. Humor for humor's sake really does not work for me. There are only a couple of games I can think of that ever did humor in the game where I actually enjoyed it. Paranoia, which is delightful in its humor, and actually the Ghostbusters game, both pretty much by the same company, so that gives you an idea. Deliberate humor in games doesn't really work, especially for if you're doing deliberate humor in a setting. The one exception I could think of is maybe a Discworld game, and I think part of what makes Discworld work is it's a ridiculous concept, it's a ridiculous world, but the people are very believable and straightforward. Yeah, there are a bunch of puns in there, but Sam Vimes has very understandable motivations. He is not purely existent to make a joke. The witches are not there just for the joke. Rincewind almost is there for the joke, but really, most of the heroes, the main characters in Discworld, and actually most of the side characters in Discworld, are not there purely for the joke. They have believable motivations. They are constructed in a humorous fashion, but their motivations is not, am I funny? Those are things I look for in a game setting. I also like that there is enough detail that I can build a picture of what ordinary people are like in a world. I've been digging through the Halo setting a lot lately, and there's a lot there. But if you went by just what's in the video games, you really couldn't develop a picture of what do average people do in that world. There are a couple of books that explore it a little bit, and that helps. But yeah, you don't know what the average guy on the street on Earth does. I mean, you know that they live in a high-tech world, but what do they do for a living? What's the struggles of the ordinary guy? You don't know. It's just not really discussed. Some of the novels actually discuss it, especially as relates to the colony worlds, farming colonies and what their life is like and things like that. But I need to be able to understand what the life is like for ordinary people for me to really dig my teeth into a setting. Another thing that is key for a good setting to me, anyway, is the room to build something. There's room to explore, and then there's room to build something. Have space for people to, you know what, I want to make my own kingdom, or I want to have a crew of my own ship, or something like that. A good setting has the ability to sort of give you room to build things and make your own things, and it gives the players the room to make room for their own things. In some ways, Star Trek doesn't make a good setting for a role-playing game because you have a hard time, at least until you get to DS9, you don't really get a picture of what ordinary people do for a living in that universe, and you don't actually seem to have a lot of room to build your own thing. Because, you could be a part of a ship, but you can't build your own thing. You have to bring something in from outside to make that. And that can be done with rules structuring, like building a house out of the Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game, applying those rules to building a ship. On an out-of-play level, you guys are designing the ship that you guys serve on or something like that. But in an in-play level, there's not a lot to actually build on. So that's something that I notice about the setting. Some examples of good settings to me, also allow for a certain level of meta, interface to it. A good example is, you can actually look at the range of things that you have in the world in something like Eberron, where you can go, all right, I want a story about this kind of thing, this kind of story, and you can on a level just go, okay, I can put that here, and I have an overall meta theme there. Like I can go to Sharn if I want to do a deeply urban sort of riff, sort of a pulp action noir feeling fantasy story. I can do that in Sharn. If I want epic high adventure war stories, I can do that in other sections. If I want creepy, like spooky stuff, do it in the Mournlands. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff there, but you have specific sort of silos of, all right, I want a spooky tale. All right, I'm probably going to set it over here because this is all the spooky stuff, like ever. I want a weird sort of mind-bendy, people questioning their own sanity thing. All right, I'll bring in some of the quarry and all of that. So you've got those concepts there. Mystara is another good one. It's like, well, it's very much based in the early D&D themes. So not only does it have, the classic fantasy tropes, but it also has some strong sci-fi elements. There's some crashed spaceships. There's a hollow world. There's a, time travel story in one of the major arcs. And the fall of the great civilization in the past basically boils down to kind of a magical nuclear war, causing the world to go completely topsy-turvy. I think that's awesome. I do. I think it's a really interesting sort of, I know where things, I can squeeze different ideas in, and it still has room for it. Like, Lord of the Rings, love Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. And I love Middle-earth. But if I don't want to do a traditional sort of fantasy story, there's no room for anything else in Middle-earth. It is a traditional fantasy story. If otherwise, pick something else. If I want to do some sci-fi tinged story in Mystara, I can do that. If I want to have cowboys show up, I have a mechanism to make it work. So, I mean, those are things that I can play with. Another thing that I like is recognizable themes to the world. One of my problems with Forgotten Realms is it's the perfect generic setting, and I like it for its sort of, well, I need a generic setting, I don't need a lot of effort to try and work my way into. Forgotten Realms is fine. It works great. It's right up there with Greyhawk in that regard. But I don't have a strong sense of its themes. Whereas, like, Spirit of the Century, I get a strong sense of the themes, the style, the sort of, these are major elements that make it feel like this game. Cyberpunk, Shadowrun, very strong on feel and style. Eberron, one of the things I love about Eberron is that it is very strong on feel and style. Dark Sun, Planescape, they're all really good at a strong sense of theme and style that is embedded in the setting. You can kind of get a flavor for it. You can taste it. And that makes a good setting to me. Anyways, these were my thoughts on a few of my favorite things to look for in settings. What do you look for in a setting? What spins the wheels? What gets you going? Does it need to have strong angelic demonic storytelling? Does it need to have fair folk for it to work for you? Does it need to have a sense of whimsy? Does it need to be dark and depressing? Does it need to be, more Conan-esque? What really gets it going for you? Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there because I'm at 15 minutes now, and that's a bit ridiculous, I think, for a ramble. But tell me what you think. What works for you? And comment below, and like if you like this, subscribe, share with people. Go to my Patreon. There's a link in the show notes if you want. You don't have to. No pressure. I'm a no pressure kind of guy. But I'll be back tomorrow. I'll have things to say. There's stuff. But I hope you enjoyed this, and you have fun gaming, and have a good evening. See ya.